Narrating.
Hey guys, we're back. This is Fallstreak. Kalia was hurling down the battlefield at breakneck speed, which wasn't unusual in itself. It was the fact that a certain someone was tailing behind her that defied all expectation. Ruby 1, commencing delivery of the package. Aqua at 2 o'clock. Get 'em, Rowena. Planting her feet, Kalia uses her body as a fulcrum to pivot and swing her package out ahead of her. With one hand gripping Kalia's dangling sleeve, Rowena reaches out with her rod to confirm Limmy's location before sweeping his legs out from under him with blinding swiftness. This is a very violent game. Then after pulling Kalia in to land the killing stomp, Rowena lets Kalia propel her to the next target in a deadly dance that rapidly mows down the rest of Noletta's base defense team. It's like something lifted straight out of a nightmare. The freedom that Kalia's slack sleeve offered, in conjunction with her blazing speed, had allowed for a scenario I had never imagined: the rapid deployment of Rowena on the front lines. Capturing the flag and resetting to neutral would have granted us a war of attrition where the red team would be pressured to commit to disadvantageous offensives. But we had expected too many resources in pursuit of that objective. They were employing their most powerful asset at the optimal time, while we were still weak from our blitz gambit. This Kalia-Rowena delivery combo was the perfect counteroffensive for punishing our overextension. Looking over our stockpile, I catch sight of Triss and Larona attempting to tie on new balloons. But the two red defense members from before had followed them and were popping balloons left and right as they attempted to revive. "We're getting camped!" With a yelp, Larona dives out of the way as Kalia and Rowena arrive to capitalize on the red team stalling. As the only ones alive, I could only watch on powerlessly as the red team ignored our flag and went straight for the throat. When Nolita and her team, I feel like I've been saying Noletta and now I'm saying Nolita, Noletta, I think, and her team returned to try and revive Larona, and Triss managed to slip out with balloons and rejoin me. But even then, we don't have the forces to retake our lost ground. Contending with the unstoppable Kalia-Rowena juggernaut was daunting enough, but we also had a numbers disadvantage. What should we do? The hope seemed to be fading from Larona's eyes, but giving up now wasn't an option. We're abandoning base. Wipe out their stockpile. If we can't defend, then we'll just have to strike back. Red had committed all of their resources to an all-out offensive, so their own stockpile was wide open. Responding to a crippling counterattack with a counterattack of our own was a desperate measure, but it was the only option we had right now. Nodding at me grimly, the blue strike team takes off to clean up the rest of the balloons in Red's stockpile. On the way, we encounter the two red offensive members that Noletta had previously subdued, but they wisely keep their distance, opting instead to regroup with the rest of their team. When we arrive, we manage to finish the job quickly, with 10 having already been eliminated from our flag capture, but even then, the situation looked bleak. With both stockpiles exhausted and all objectives rendered obsolete, the red team turns their fangs on us. The odds were an overwhelming 3 versus 6, with the red team being at full power. Taking full advantage of their members, the red team spreads out in a fan formation, seizing comprehensive control of the battlefield as the game enters its final phase. Slowly but surely, they press our diminutive group into a corner with a safe and systematic skirmishes, giving us no chance to fight back. Though we were managing to ward off the combined attacks of Kalia's offensive team and Rowena's defensive team, we were growing tired under the continued harass. We had no relief options compared to the red team, who couldn't alternate fresh bodies to keep up the siege. "It's useless, Aid. Your team's morale has fallen too low. You cannot win." Kalia taunts us as we gradually run out of space to back up. But surrender was not an option. Even if we have to crawl, we'll never give up. There's still a way. We just need to find the trump card. So dramatic. I tried to rally my comrades behind the final shard of hope, but exhaustion was beginning to creep into even my voice. Ha! Find it if you can. Even if such a thing actually existed, there's no way it'd save you from these odds. Laughing like a despotic tyrant, Kalia continues to constrict her forces around us. Kuh! Larah cries out in fatigue as she barely manages to escape with her life after warding off a pincer attack on our flanks. One last thing before we begin. Ooh, it's a flashback. There's a trump card hidden somewhere on the battlefield. Heaving deeply, Triss drags himself off the ground after being driven back by a vicious three-man charge. Whoever discovers the trump card will be granted a powerful advantage. If you find your team on the verge of defeat, search for this trump card to turn the tide of battle. Isn't there anything we can do? Your only hint is as follows. Look through the sky to find the pure purpose of this school. Time seems to slow to a crawl as I close my eyes, letting the tension leak from my body with a slow exhalation. An unending cycle of being broken down over and over again, no matter how many times I tried to stand back up. Giving up before this hopeless situation would be the natural thing to do. There's no way out of this. Nobody would blame me for succumbing to those powerless thoughts. But even then, there's a way. I choose to struggle. A heat begins to build up behind my shut eyeballs as I voice my belief with unwavering conviction. Amidst the darkness stretching out before me, a single golden light was shining. Reaching out, I seize that golden radiance in hand and force my eyes open. I see it! The moment vision returns to me, I perceive the blue team stockpile at the far left of the battlefield and the blue flag at the far right. The path forward was clear. To me, blue team! I figured out what the trump card is! Bellowing in the firmest voice I can muster, I motion to our left in the direction of the blue team's stockpile. Break through to that location at all costs. Hope flickers in the eyes of my comrades as they're shown a light beyond the edge of despair they've seen teetering on for so long. For the motherland! Summoning every last ounce of strength left in their bodies, the last remaining blue team members charge forward with desperate ferocity. What? Stop them! Don't let them get there, no matter what. Surprised by our sudden fierce resistance, Kalia orders the red team to pull back and tighten their formation to prevent us from slipping through. Barreling through the outstretched arms of multiple red interceptors, Triss penetrates deep into the enemy territory before finally being snuffed out. With a valiant cry, Larah scatters the resulting pile up and carries us even deeper before succumbing to the ravenous hordes. However, as for me, instead of continuing down the path we had carved, I make a sharp right and beeline for the blue flag. A feint? Though it pains me to use my comrades as a decoy, there's no better way to deceive your enemies than by deceiving your allies. Catching on to my diversion, Kalia, who had been laying back to serve as a sweeper, breaks out into an all-out sprint to cut me off. At this rate, she'll block me off from the flag in time, if only barely, but that's fine. Just when our paths are about to overlap, I abruptly make another sharp right, letting her skid out of control by herself in front of the blue flag. A double feint? Mustering all of my remaining strength, I race down the sideline to my true objective, a bystander watching over the game from midfield. Ha, I've figured it out, Mr. Naru. Panting heavily, I double over and rest my hands on my knees as I try to catch my breath. Hold Kalia! Stand down! Mr. Naru gestures behind me as the sound of footsteps belatedly converges on our location. Aid, you say you figured it out. In that case, what is the trump card? After taking a moment to gulp down some air, I open my mouth to speak. To look through the sky to find the pure purpose of this school. Taken as a whole, it leads nowhere, but when broken down, it all comes together. First, purpose of this school. I tried to think of something unique to the school at first, but when it comes down to it, the purpose of every school can be boiled down to one thing. That is, learning. Indeed, it is as you say, sometimes the closer you look, the less you see. After having the first of my thoughts confirmed by Mr. Naru, I continue. Next, look through the sky to find, On a representational level, what would you need to search through the sky? The first thing that comes to mind is wings. With those two conclusions, deriving the final clue from pure comes naturally. Something that symbolizes purity, for example, the color white. Naru can be interpreted to mean white wings of learning. If it's difficult for you to understand, you may refer to me as Mr. Naru for now. White wings of learning, the meaning of your name, Mr. Naru. The trump card is you. With not a change in expression, Mr. Naru closes his eyes at my answer. I must say, the stunt you pulled to concentrate and displace the red team's formation was impressive. But instead of confirming my answer, he slowly circles around behind me and begins untying my balloon. Could it be I was mistaken? With a crestfallen murmur, I drop my gaze to the ground. Rather than answer me, though, Mr. Naru poses a question of his own. Tell me, child, do you know what a deus ex machina is? Puzzled, I try to recall when I had read about it in Mother's collection. God from the machine. It refers to a plot device in which an inextricable situation is solved by sudden intervention. Could it be? I feel my eyes widen as I look back up just in time to see Mr. Naru tying my balloon to his back. Call for me, and I shall come. With a flourish of his arm, Mr. Naru casts his coat to the wind and steps into the battlefield. Rejoice, blue team! I have come to avenge your fallen! With an otherworldly roar, Mr. Naru surges forward with demonic speed. In the blink of an eye, he shreds two of the red offensive's balloons to pieces before turning to bear down on Kalia. What in the world? Fall back, Kalia! You can't take him! Quick on the uptake, Erwina calls Kalia to turn tail. But before she can get far, Mr. Naru catches up and raptures the fragile air vessel, signifying her life with an impossibly swift and accurate strike. To think he could outspeed Kalia to such a degree, even reading her attempt to juke him off, it was unbelievable. Go, Mr. Naru! Woo! There's still hope! It's time to tip the scales! Mr. Naru! No longer was the blue team quailing at the prospect of imminent defeat. Emboldened by the grand reversal, we cry out in jubilation as our fighting spirits are restoked. This is for my teacher's pride! Letting loose a blood-curdling howl, Mr. Naru sweeps through the bewildered red team as they scramble to stay alive. By introducing a single new element, we had completely turned the tables and regained the initiative. Was this the fury of a teacher that had been forced to endure helium-induced humiliation in front of his own class? An irrevocable death spiral, utter decimation. Before long, only one red team member remained standing. Father, you're acting childish. Erwina's stoic figure stood as the last obstacle before Mr. Naru's ceaseless advance. Come and strike down this childish father of yours, then. If it's you, there's no need to hold back. Coldly informing him she will not hold back, Erwina manipulates a mechanism on her iconic rod and smashes it against the ground. With a sliding sound, the rod abruptly extends to a length exceeding her full height. Dauntless and unmovable, Erwina brandishes the uninhibited tool before her, adopting the honed stance of a seasoned lancer. What's going on? It can do that? Everything rested on this duel between Erwina and Mr. Naru. Dripping suspense, bleeding tension. As the two hardened combatants squared off against each other, a climatic gust blew through the battlefield, rustling the chilled air. The moment the frozen air is disturbed, Mr. Naru lunges forward, precipitating the beginning of the end. Ha! Erwina was quick to react, bringing her rod to bear the breathtaking speed. With a flurry of strikes, she walls off Mr. Naru's advance, forcing him to step back and block with his shins and forearms. Pushing Mr. Naru off balance, Erwina lifts her rod high into the air and brings it down with deafening force. Ka-thunk! But he manages to spin away at the last moment, barely escaping the devastating attack. I'm gonna just say once again, this is super violent for little kids at school playing a game. The ground. Where Erwina's whiffed strike had struck the ground, there was a massive gash in the earth, as if it had been plowed by a cannonball. The class could only gape in disbelief. Nope, nope, nope. Content to sit safely on the sidelines, I shake my head gravely at the ongoing clash. Considering she had just ripped Mother Earth anew. The amount of control it would have taken to lightly nudge someone like she's been doing until now was inconceivable. Mr. Naru's blocking it, barehanded. Go, Rowena, you can do it! Believe! Believe! We believe in you! This is seriously on another level. Moving like coiled lightning, Mr. Naru slips through a gap in Rowena's zoning, closing the distance with a vicious roundhouse at the temple. But with a red bordering on prescience, Rowena steps precisely on one half step on the side, striking the blow off course with a brisk adjustment of her rod's back end. A flurry of punches, a squall of kicks. Mr. Naru follows up with a ground-shattering advance. If Mr. Naru's assault was unstoppable, though, Rowena's poise was unbreakable. She slowly retreats as she deflects and evades Mr. Naru's attacks with measured movements, maintaining a fixed distance the entire time. Then, sensing an opening, Rowena abruptly releases her rod, lunging under an off-center strike and plunging her hand into Mr. Naru's gut with a counterattack that sends him skidding. She's one heck of a brawler, too. Rather than using her superior range as a crutch, she was using it to limit Mr. Naru's options, setting the terms of close-quarter combat in a way that favored her. Those of us standing on the sidelines could only look on in stunned silence at what was unfolding before us. Our humble game of capture the flag had escalated to something far beyond the scope of our imagination. What we were witnessing could only be described as an epic fight to the death. It seems like you're quite motivated today. Though he did not flinch or clutch at where he sustained damage, beads of sweat could be seen tracing down Mr. Naru's face. You have violated the integrity of the children's game by choosing to partake. I will not allow such an infringement to pass. I know you were a prime collaborator in yesterday's prank. I'm not that heavy of a sleeper unless certain incriminating conditions are met. Do not think you will be afforded any claim to righteousness. You shall know the same indignity you brought upon me. The final clash, a dictate of certain defeat. Could his calloused hands grasp the fruit of victory from the jaws of defeat? Hopeful prayers ran through the minds of the blue team as they gazed upon the form of the one who had shown them the light in the sea of darkness. It seems you wish to suffer the same humiliation of yesterday once more, Father. Allow me to grant that wish. The promise of certain victory, a decree of absolute penitence. Could her unseeing eyes capture a vision of salvation amidst the despair of sudden upheaval? Yearning pleas ran through the minds of the red team as they gazed upon the form of their last standing bastion. Light footsteps, regulated breaths. Adopting a vastly different approach from before, Mr. Naru stealthily circles around Rowena. Futile. In response, Rowena proactively seizes the attack with a broad crouching sweep. Forced to evade or risk being struck, Mr. Naru pulls away with a distinctly loud hop that restores the sensory information being deprived from Rowena. With his position now ascertained, Rowena pivots with her residual momentum, following up with a strike at Mr. Naru's unanchored knee. But with impossible deftness, he twists away, causing the attack to whiff by a small margin. Sa-shwa! Battle cries full of spirit that rang out of the beat of his footsteps like a war song. In what seemed to be a last resort of producing disruptive sounds to throw Rowena off, Mr. Naru weaves an oblique pattern around Rowena to strike at her flank. But Rowena parries and counters the attack with relative ease. Rather than misdirect her, it was only giving her more to operate with. Sa-suya! Even then, though, Mr. Naru does not cease his cries. Mr. Naru should be aware of Rowena's aptitude at processing sensory information more than anyone else. So why was he employing this strategy? Sa-suya! Over and over again, he continues to enact the same cycle despite its proven ineffectiveness. Then suddenly, Sa-ya! Mr. Naru abruptly changes his cadence, catching Rowena in the moment of vulnerability. Realizing he had slipped into her defenses, Rowena tries to bring her rod to bear, but Mr. Naru pinions it mid-stride and whirls powerfully, sending its slender form flying high into the sky. He had conditioned Rowena into unconsciously following the rhythm he established, switching it up at the last moment for the punish. It's over. Committing his entire being, Mr. Nauru launches deep into what had been Erwena's strictly controlled space. He wards off Erwena's attempt to parry, reaches around and under her exposed back, and plants a decisive killing blow to her balloon. All movement ceased as the deafening little burst resounded through the air. Not a single breath could be heard as we stared, awestruck, at the grand conclusion. Humph, it's my win. Mr. Narau smiles thinly as he lowers his hand that had dealt the finishing blow. 3 steps ahead of you. With the shrill sound of air being pierced, something descends from the sky and impales the ground behind Mr. Narau, rupturing his balloon in the process. It was Erwena's rod. When I knocked it away? Allow me to quote you, Father. After your balloon is popped, you cannot rejoin the game until you return to your team base and acquire another balloon from your team's allotted stockpile. Since I launched my rod into the air before my balloon was popped, it counts as a valid kill since I was still in the game when the action was completed. No way! Simultaneous checkmate! Is that even possible? Heh, even that feeble parry was just to move me into the proper position, wasn't it? Calculated. This means we both lose, Father. Do you remember the rules you recounted to us? First off, a team will be counted as losing if the balloons worn and stored on its side are popped. A losing team must accept punishment of inhaling helium until their voice becomes squeaky. Once that is done, the other team gets the exclusive right of dictating what must be voiced during that duration. The rules never stated there could only be one loser. Therefore, Erwena extends her hand to point slightly offset at her father. Accept your punishment with the rest of us. We could do nothing but gawp in astonishment at the end result that Erwena had brought about. That means both teams lose? But that also means both teams win in a way, doesn't it? Wait, so everyone has to do the punishment? No way, no way! Foolishness. I'd gladly relive yesterday if it grants me the gratification of watching you do the same. Boldly accepting her scenario of mutually assured destruction, Mr. Narau proceeds to retrieve the helium balloon set aside for the purpose of punishing the losers. Nobody could have foreseen that everyone would end up losing, though. Are you ready, class? This is now a showdown of coming up with the juiciest things to make the other side say. What shall we make them sing? Roguish suggestions and raucous chatter was had. But ultimately, eyes come to rest upon Triss as he imitates a chicken pecking at the ground. What about animal sounds? Hey, let's make them mimic chickens. Cows, too. I want to hear them bark. Look, Noletta, you can do your favorite, constipated cat noises. Remember to put your heart into it, Noletta. Bully. Now then, Mr. Narau turns back to Erwena after completing his distribution of the helium balloons. Prepare to recount the most shameful things conceivable, child. You will be groveling on the ground when I'm done with you, Father. Such familial love. Even after their duels end, their competitive spirits were still burning as bright as ever. Let us begin, then. Inhale your helium, everyone. You shall recite everything the opposing team dictates to you, as long as your voice is affected. With unprecedented enthusiasm, everyone undoes the fastening on their balloon and inhales the gas with heaving gulps. And just like that, our festival of nonsensical noises began. Everyone was cracking up as much at their own voice as they were at the ridiculous things that the others were forcing the team to vocalize. In a twist of irony, the two teams start competing to see who could make the louder and more outlandish noises.
What abomination is that supposed to be? Can you tell? It's a dragon! Sounds more like a chihuahua and its death throes.
It was a tumultuous ruckus, complete with thigh-slapping cackling and mirthful crying. Amidst it all, Triss seemed to be having the time of his life, enjoying everyone's inanity without having to participate himself.
Hey, that's not fair! Triss gets to hear everyone say humiliating things without doing anything himself. Indeed, it's
His carousing comes to a glum and abrupt stop when he's smacked in the face by a harsh reality. The mental image of Larona curling up and whimpering at an abusive owner was so real I could practically see the tail between her legs. The rest of the class following suit, Tris quickly finds his calling wiping the floor with the best impressions anyone could manage. His reproduction of a crab in particular was disturbingly spot on. Larona, your sacrifice was not in vain. A sense of calm fulfillment settles over me as I survey the two teams, mingling and playing their hearts out with each other. A short ways off, Kalia was imposing command after command on a tormented Larona. You know, you can dictate commands back at her, Larona. Meanwhile, Tris was defending his position of the best mimic through four-legged horse races against several challengers. Amusingly enough, Noletta seemed to be giving him a run for his money, all while yelling, "I want to eat cavalletti." Wait, if it's pasta we're talking about, I think you mean cavatelli, Noletta. Further off, Rowena and Mr. Norrell were squaring off with severe expressions on their faces. They were of another caliber, being able to exchange fighting words with such wacky voices. It was quite surreal how out of place they looked amidst the goofy animal noises and chortling. Yet there was no doubt their presence belonged to the complete picture painted before me. A rising cacophony of sounds, everyone's voice, a contribution. It all blends together to create a special song of our very own, a song of silly laughter and dumb smiles, gilded the minutes and hours.
A happy world where everyone wins isn't really possible, is it?
I gaze up at the vivid blue sky with its big meandering clouds.
In that case, let's treasure the fleeting world. The fleeting world where everyone happily loses together then.
An ending like a transient dream, where everyone is given the gift of departing with wide smiles and stories to tell those awaiting their return back home. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this episode, so stay tuned for the next episode.
Thanks for watching!